The morning sun had just begun to rise over the small town, painting the sky with soft shades of gold and pink. The streets were waking up with the sound of footsteps, car engines, and the faint call of birds perched on rooftops. At the corner of Maple Street stood a cozy little cafe named the Willow Cup. Its windows glowed warmly, and the smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee beans drifted outside, calling people in like a gentle invitation. Inside the cafe, the air was alive with energy. Cups clinked as they touched the saucers, spoons stirred, sugar into steaming mugs, and chairs scraped softly against the wooden floor as customers settled into their favorite spots. It was a familiar rhythm, one that played out every morning, yet it never grew old. Behind the counter stood Emma. She had been working at the Willow Cup for 3 years, and in that time, she had become the heart of the place. She was in her late 20s, with a calm smile that had a way of making people feel welcome even before she spoke. She knew many of the regulars by name and remembered their usual orders. For her, making coffee was not just about filling cups, it was about offering comfort and kindness to everyone who walked through the door. Emma moved with steady grace, her hands practiced and sure as she prepared lattes, cappuccinos, and teas. She greeted each customer with a cheerful, "Good morning," even when the line stretched out the door. It was not always easy, but she believed that small acts of warmth could make someone's whole day better. That morning was no different. The cafe was busier than usual because it was a Friday, and people were eager to grab a drink before heading to work. The air carried the hum of conversations, a mix of laughter, discussions about weekend plans, and the quiet typing of students, working on their laptops in the corner. Emma thrived in this environment. She loved the sound of life buzzing around her. Mrs. Turner, an elderly woman who came in every morning at 8 o'clock, stood at the counter smiling. She always ordered the same thing, a simple cup of black coffee with a slice of banana bread. Emma knew her well and already had her order prepared by the time she reached the front of the line. "Here you go, Mrs. Turner," Emma said warmly. "Just the way you like it." Mrs. Turner chuckled softly and said, "You always take such good care of me, dear." It was these small exchanges that made Emma feel proud of her work. Next came a group of office workers rushing in, their voices quick and eager as they discussed a project deadline. Emma listened carefully to their complicated orders, nodding, and repeating each one back to make sure nothing was missed. She worked quickly, her movements smooth as she steamed milk, poured espresso, and handed over drinks topped with foam art that looked almost too pretty to drink. The cafe's atmosphere felt light and joyful, almost like a family gathering. Each person who entered added a note to the morning melody. The young boy who came in with his father before school giggled as Emma gave him a small hot chocolate with whipped cream. The father, grateful for the gesture, gave Emma a nod of thanks. In moments like these, Emma felt she was not just serving drinks, but also creating memories for people. But running a cafe during the rush hour was not without its challenges. The line never seemed to end, and every few minutes the sound of the espresso machine hissed loudly. Sweat formed on Emma's brow, but she kept her smile. She was proud of her ability to remain calm and kind, no matter how busy it became. Her coworker, a young man named Daniel, worked beside her, calling out names and helping carry drinks to waiting customers. Together, they moved like a team that knew each other's rhythm. Emma's mind often wandered during these busy mornings. She wondered about the people she served. What kind of day did they have ahead? Were they happy, stressed, or lonely? She believed that even one kind word or one warm smile could change how someone felt. It was this thought that gave her energy to keep going, even when her feet ached and her arms grew tired from lifting trays. Outside, the town grew brighter as the sun climbed higher. The golden light spilled through the cafe's windows, casting a glow on the tables and highlighting the steam rising from the cups. Emma paused for just a moment to look around. She saw people laughing, sharing pastries, sipping slowly from mugs, and she felt a sense of peace. This cafe was more than just a workplace. It was a place where lives touched, even if only for a few minutes. The rush continued, but Emma stayed steady. She wiped the counter, took orders, and encouraged her team with gentle words. Customers thanked her, some hurried, some lingering, but all left with something in their hands and perhaps something lighter in their hearts. At that moment, Emma did not know that the day ahead would test her patience and strength in ways she had never experienced before. She did not know that the cafe, usually a place of kindness and calm, would soon become the stage for an unforgettable scene. For now, the morning remained beautiful, the air sweet with the scent of coffee and pastries, and Emma stood behind the counter with the same gentle smile she had worn every day since she first started. The willow cup carried on like a small world of its own, a place where the morning began with warmth, where stories started quietly with the clink of a cup, and where one barista's kindness touched everyone who walked through the door. The willow cup was still filled with the gentle sounds of clinking cups and soft conversations when the cafe door opened once again. The bell above the door gave its usual cheerful ring, but this time the energy that entered with the new customer felt different. Emma noticed it right away. A tall man in his 40s stepped inside. His shoulders were tense, his eyes sharp, and his footsteps carried a kind of impatience that seemed to fill the space around him. Unlike the other customers who came in with relaxed smiles or sleepy faces ready for their morning drink, this man looked as though he carried a storm within him. Emma greeted him with the same warmth she offered to everyone. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to the Willow Cup. What can I get started for you today?" Her voice was calm, steady, and kind. The man gave only a quick glance at the menu and replied in a tone that sounded more like a demand than a request. "Large coffee, extra hot, no cream, and make it quick. I don't have time to wait around." Emma nodded politely, not letting his sharp words affect her. "Of course, sir. One large black coffee, extra hot. I'll have it ready shortly." She moved with the same steady rhythm, preparing the order while still managing the line of other customers. But the man seemed restless. His eyes darted to the other baristas, then to the clock on the wall. He tapped his foot on the floor and sighed loudly, as if every second spent waiting was an insult to him. The cafe, usually filled with warm energy, grew a little heavier with his presence. When Emma placed the steaming cup of coffee on the counter and called out his order, she smiled again. "Here you go, sir. Large black coffee, extra hot." He took the cup without saying thank you and lifted it to his lips right there at the counter. After a single sip, his expression hardened even more. He set the cup down with a loud thud and looked directly at Emma. "This isn't hot enough," he snapped. His voice carried across the cafe, causing nearby customers to pause mid-conversation. "I said extra hot. Does no one here know how to follow simple instructions?" Emma's heart beat a little faster, but her face remained calm. She had faced difficult customers before, though few had been this harsh. "I'm very sorry, sir. Let me make a fresh one for you right away. I'll make sure it's extra hot this time." She reached for the cup, but the man pulled it back for another sip, as though testing her words. He shook his head with disapproval. "Unbelievable. How hard is it to pour hot coffee? This is the only thing you people do all day." The cafe grew quieter. People looked at each other uncomfortably, some frowning at the man's behavior, others watching Emma to see how she would respond. Emma's hands did not shake. She spoke gently, almost like a teacher speaking to a child. "I understand you want it hotter, and I will prepare it again right now. Please allow me just a moment." The man finally slid the cup back across the counter with a sharp push. A bit of the liquid spilled onto the counter, and Emma quickly grabbed a cloth to wipe it away. She turned to the espresso machine and began. Making the new drink, her mind focused on doing her job well despite the heavy feeling pressing on her chest. Daniel, her co-worker, glanced at her with concern. "Are you okay?" he whispered softly. Emma gave a small nod. She knew losing her composure would only make the situation worse. She wanted to protect the peaceful atmosphere of the cafe for the sake of the other customers, as well as herself. When the second cup was ready, Emma carefully placed it on the counter. "Here you are, sir. Fresh and extra hot, just as you asked." This time, the man took the cup and drank slowly, as though searching for a reason to be displeased. His brow furrowed, and after a long pause, he frowned again. Still not right. "This is ridiculous." The customers around the cafe shifted in their seats. A mother holding her child shook her head quietly. An older gentleman near the window folded his newspaper and muttered under his breath. The tension in the room grew thick, yet Emma remained steady, though inside she felt a deep sadness at being spoken to with such disrespect. She tried again, her voice soft but firm. "I can make it once more, sir. Or perhaps I can suggest another option that might suit you better. Your comfort is important to us." The man's face tightened, and his voice rose. "No, I don't want suggestions. I want what I asked for. If you can't even do that, then what's the point of this place?" Every word seemed to cut into the calm atmosphere Emma had worked so hard to create. Still, she held on to her patience, not because it was easy, but because she believed in kindness, even when it was not returned. She reached once more for the cup, ready to remake it. But in that moment, the man made a choice that would shock everyone in the cafe. He lifted the cup high in frustration, his eyes flashing with anger. His voice boomed through the quiet cafe as he said, "This is useless." The next instant, the cup tipped forward, and the steaming liquid spilled out onto the counter, splashing dangerously close to Emma's hands. The cafe fell silent. The only sound was the dripping of coffee sliding down the wooden counter onto the floor. Customers stared in disbelief. Some gasped softly, others shook their heads in quiet anger at the man's behavior. Emma stood still, her chest tight, her breath shallow, her hands trembling, not just from the heat, but from the sting of humiliation. The man set the empty cup down harshly and crossed his arms, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Emma looked at him, her eyes filled not with anger, but with a quiet sadness that spoke louder than any words could. At that very moment, the door at the back of the cafe opened. The sound of footsteps approached, steady and deliberate. The air seemed to shift as everyone turned toward the back room. Out stepped Mr. Lawson, the owner of the Willow Cup, his expression calm yet unreadable. Emma's heart lifted slightly at the sight of him. She knew that he carried not only the authority of being the owner, but also the wisdom of someone who valued respect above all. The customers straightened in their seats, waiting to see what would happen next. The storm inside the cafe was far from over. But with Mr. Lawson now standing in the room, there was a new sense of balance. The man who had caused so much disruption did not yet know that his behavior was about to be challenged in a way he would never forget. The Willow Cup had always been known as a place of peace. Its wooden tables, warm lighting, and soft music made people feel at home. Yet now, after the man spilled his coffee across the counter, silence covered the cafe like a heavy blanket. The cheerful rhythm of the morning was gone, replaced by unease. Emma stood still behind the counter. Her apron was damp from the splashed coffee, her hands trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. She was not afraid of the heat of the drink. What hurt more was the sudden weight of being treated without kindness in front of so many people. She had served hundreds of customers, and she always believed in patience. But this moment tested her deeply. The customers who had filled the cafe with laughter minutes before now watched in silence. A young mother hugged her child closer. Two office workers whispered to each other with disbelief. An elderly man shook his head slowly, his eyes showing both sadness and disapproval. The cafe, usually filled with light conversation, had fallen into complete stillness. The man who had caused the scene stood tall, arms crossed, his face hard and unyielding. He seemed almost proud of the chaos he had created, as if spilling the coffee proved some kind of point. His voice broke the silence, sharp and cutting. This is what happens when people cannot do their jobs. I asked for something simple, and this is the result. Emma's lips parted as if to respond, but the words would not come. Her heart ached, yet she still refused to answer in anger. She knew her strength was not in raising her voice, but in holding her dignity, even when faced with cruelty. Her silence, however, only gave the man more space to fill with harshness. Daniel, standing a few steps away, clenched his jaw. He wanted to step in, but he also knew that Emma would want to handle things with calmness. His hands gripped the edge of the counter, and he glanced toward the back room where Mr. Lawson had just appeared. The owner walked forward slowly. His footsteps were steady, echoing faintly in the hushed cafe. Mr. Lawson was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and a presence that carried quiet authority. He did not rush or raise his voice. He simply moved closer, his eyes fixed on the man at the counter. The rude customer finally noticed him. "Are you the manager?" he asked sharply. Mr. Lawson's calm eyes did not waver. "I am the owner of this cafe," he replied in a voice that was steady and low, but filled with weight. "And I have seen enough." The man smirked as if ready to argue. "Good. Then maybe you can explain why your staff cannot make something as simple as hot coffee." The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Mr. Lawson's response. But instead of speaking right away, he turned his gaze toward Emma. His expression softened, and he gave her a small nod, as if to say, "You are not alone." That single gesture brought her a wave of relief. Then Mr. Lawson looked back at the man. His voice was calm, yet it carried through the cafe with clarity. "My staff works hard every day to serve this community. They treat each person who walks through that door with respect and kindness. What I just witnessed from you is not acceptable." The man's smirk faded slightly, but he quickly straightened his shoulders. "I paid for a drink. I expect it to be right." "Is that too much to ask?" Mr. Lawson shook his head slowly. "Asking for what you paid for is never too much. But the way you choose to speak, the way you choose to act, that is what matters. You could have asked with patience. Instead, you chose to insult, to belittle, and to humiliate. That is not the way we treat people here." The cafe remained silent, yet the customers' faces told the story. They nodded subtly, their expressions filled with agreement. A few leaned forward, waiting for what would come next. The man shifted uncomfortably. For the first time since he entered, he seemed uncertain. His voice grew louder, as if volume could hide his unease. "I don't see why you're making this such a big deal. It's just coffee." Emma finally found her voice. It was soft, yet it carried across the quiet cafe. "It is not just coffee. It is the way you treat people. That matters more than anything else." Her words hung in the air, simple but powerful. Customers nodded, some smiling gently in support. The man's face flushed, and he looked down for a brief moment before lifting his gaze again with forced defiance. Mr. Lawson stepped closer, his presence calm yet unshakable. "You have a choice," he said evenly. "You can accept another drink, offered with respect, or you can leave. But you will not continue to treat my staff this way. Not here." The man looked around the cafe. Dozens of eyes were on him now, not with fear, but with quiet judgment. For the first time, he seemed to realize he was standing alone. The confidence in his stance weakened, though he tried to hide it. A long pause followed. The sound of the coffee machine in the background filled the silence, hissing softly as if reminding everyone of the simple purpose of the cafe. Finally, the man muttered, "Fine. I'll take another coffee. Make it quick." His voice lacked the sharpness it had carried before. Mr. Lawson did not move immediately. He studied the man with calm eyes, then gave a single nod. Emma will prepare it. But this time, you will wait with patience, and you will treat her with the respect she deserves. Emma felt her chest tighten, not with fear now, but with gratitude. The room felt lighter, though the tension had not fully disappeared. She turned back to the machine, steadying her hands as she began to prepare the drink once more. Her movements were careful, precise, almost ceremonial, as though she was reclaiming the dignity that had been threatened moments before. The customers watched silently, many of them admiring her grace. The young boy who had come earlier with, his father whispered softly, "She's brave." His father gave a quiet nod, proud of Emma's strength. When the drink was ready, Emma placed it on the counter with the same calmness as before. She looked at the man directly, her eyes steady. "Here is your coffee, sir." The man reached for it, but the weight of the moment kept him from speaking further. He gave only a quick nod and stepped aside, his earlier confidence now replaced with silence. The outburst had shaken the cafe, but it had also revealed something stronger. It showed the patience of Emma, the steady wisdom of Mr. Lawson, and the quiet unity of the customers who stood by with respect. The Willow Cup was no longer just a cafe that morning. It had become a place where dignity triumphed over anger, where kindness stood firm even against cruelty. The storm had not fully passed, but the lesson had begun to unfold. The Willow Cup carried a strange quietness after the man's angry display. Although Mr. Lawson had stepped in to calm the situation, the cafe no longer felt the same as it had that morning. The warmth was still there, but it was fragile, as if one unkind word could break it completely. Emma stood behind the counter, wiping the surface where the coffee had spilled. Her hands moved carefully, but inside her heart was heavy. She had been humiliated in front of so many people. Even though she had not done anything wrong, she felt a sting that no cloth could wipe away. It was not only the hot liquid on her skin that caused her discomfort. It was the feeling of being treated as if she were less than human, as if her kindness meant nothing. She had faced tired customers before, she had seen impatience many times, but never had she experienced such cruelty. Daniel watched her closely. He noticed the way her shoulders drooped just a little more than usual, and he noticed how she avoided looking at the man who now sat at a table, sipping the coffee she had remade. Daniel wanted to say something comforting, but the right words did not come easily. Sometimes silence seemed safer than trying to fix a wound with quick phrases. The customers around the cafe felt the weight of the moment too. Some returned to their conversations, but even those voices carried a cautious tone. People spoke more softly, as if they did not want to disturb the delicate balance. An older woman near the window kept her eyes on Emma, her face showing both sympathy and quiet admiration. Emma took a deep breath as she continued her work. She reminded herself that she had chosen this job because she loved people, not just the pleasant ones, but also the difficult ones. She believed that patience and kindness were stronger than anger. Yet, in that moment, she could not ignore the pain pressing against her heart. She thought of her parents, who had taught her as a child that respect for others was the true measure of character. Her mother used to say, "People may forget your words, but they will never forget how you made them feel." Emma repeated that line in her mind as if it were a shield. But the memory of the man's harsh voice and the sight of the spilled coffee kept breaking through. Mr. Lawson, meanwhile, stood quietly nearby. His calm presence brought comfort, but even he could see that Emma was shaken. He walked over slowly and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You handled yourself with grace," he said softly. "Do not let one person's actions make you forget who you are." Emma nodded, though her throat felt tight. She wanted to believe those words fully, but part of her still felt bruised by the experience. She forced a small smile to reassure him, then returned to serving the next customer. The next few orders came from people who seemed to want to restore the warmth of the cafe. A young woman ordered a latte and added kindly, "Thank you for your patience today." A man buying tea said, "You're doing a great job." Small gestures, small words, but each one touched Emma's heart. She realized she was not alone. Still, the image of the man's anger lingered. His raised voice, his sharp words, and his careless action of spilling the coffee had left a mark that would not disappear so quickly. She had tried to stay strong, but even the strongest heart can feel weary after being treated unfairly. Daniel leaned toward her during a quiet moment. "Do you want to take a short break?" he asked. Emma hesitated, then shook her head. "No, if I step away now, it will feel like he won." Daniel gave a small nod of respect. He understood. Emma was not simply serving coffee. She was protecting her dignity by continuing to do her job with grace. As the minutes passed, the cafe began to regain its rhythm. The sound of milk steaming, cups clinking, and soft conversations filled the air again. Yet under that normal rhythm, an invisible wound remained. Emma felt it each time she wiped her hands on her apron or glanced at the table where the man still sat. The shock of being humiliated in front of others was not something that disappeared quickly. It pressed on her heart in waves. Sometimes it was quiet, like a dull ache. Other times it felt sharp, like a sudden cut. She carried it silently. Not wanting to trouble anyone else, Mr. Lawson noticed this. He had been in business for many years, and he knew that no training manual could prepare someone for moments like these. He admired Emma's strength, but he also understood the silent pain she carried. He made a silent promise to himself that, before the day ended, he would make sure she knew just how much she was valued. The man at the table drank slowly, avoiding the stares of those around him. For the first time, his posture was not proud but heavy. Perhaps he felt the weight of the silence that still followed him. Perhaps he realized that respect is something that cannot be demanded, only earned. Emma kept moving, serving, smiling as best as she could. Every thank you she received from other customers reminded her that one voice of unkindness could not erase the many voices of kindness. Still, the memory of what had happened that morning would stay with her for a long time. As the morning rush faded, Emma finally allowed herself to pause. She leaned against the counter for just a moment, closing her eyes. She was tired, but she also felt something stronger growing within her. She had faced humiliation, but she had not lost herself. She had held on to patience, even when it was tested beyond measure. The pain was real, but so was the lesson. She now understood more clearly than ever that kindness is not weakness. Kindness in the face of cruelty is strength. It hurts, but it also shines brighter than anger ever can. When she opened her eyes again, she saw Mr. Lawson watching her with gentle respect. He gave her a small nod, a silent reminder that she was not defined by what had been done to her, but by how she had chosen to respond. The shock of the outburst still hung in the air, but so did the quiet strength of a young barista who refused to let unkindness steal her dignity. And in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it, a question remained. How would this story end? The Willow Cup was no longer just a cafe that day. It had become a place of lessons, a stage where patience and pain stood side by side, waiting for what would come next. The Willow Cup had quieted again, though the memory of the morning's storm lingered in the air. Emma continued to serve drinks with as much grace as she could, yet her heart still carried the sting of the earlier humiliation. She tried to smile for each customer, but behind her calm expression was a deep exhaustion. Mr. Lawson, the owner, had watched everything with careful eyes. He had seen the spilled coffee, the harsh words, and the silence that followed. For years, he had built this cafe as a place of warmth and respect. He knew it was more than just a business. It was a community space where people felt safe, where kindness was expected, and where dignity was protected. To watch one of his staff suffer under such treatment stirred something powerful within him. He had been in business long enough to know that not every customer would be patient. He had seen complaints before, but he had also learned that true strength was shown not in avoiding conflict, but in handling it with wisdom. As he stepped forward from the back room, the cafe seemed to shift. People noticed his presence. The soft conversations paused again, and all eyes turned toward him. Mr. Lawson walked with steady steps. His silver hair caught the light from the window, and though his face was lined with age, it carried a calm authority that needed no raised voice. Emma looked up at him, and her heart eased just a little. She trusted him, not just as her employer, but as someone who valued people over profit. The man who had caused the disruption sat at his table, his cup nearly empty. He looked up at Mr. Lawson with a hint of challenge in his eyes, as though ready to defend his actions. But Mr. Lawson did not meet that challenge with anger. Instead, he approached with patience, though his gaze was firm. He stopped at the counter, standing beside Emma. He placed one hand gently on the wooden surface and spoke in a voice that carried through the cafe with steady strength. "I am the owner of this cafe. I have watched what has happened this morning, and I cannot remain silent." The man leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Good. Then maybe you can explain why your staff cannot get something as simple as hot coffee, right?" Mr. Lawson's expression did not change. His eyes remained calm, though there was no softness in them now. "My staff does more than serve coffee," he said. "They welcome people with respect. They listen with patience. They work hard every day to bring warmth to this place. That is something worth more than a hot drink." The cafe grew still again. Customers leaned forward slightly, drawn to every word. Emma stood quietly beside him, her heart filled with gratitude at his defense. The man gave a sharp laugh, though it carried little real confidence. "I paid for service. I expect it to be right. That is not too much to ask." Mr. Lawson nodded slowly. "You are right. Every customer has the right to receive what they order, but no customer has the right to strip away another person's dignity. What I saw here was not a simple request for hotter coffee. What I saw was an attempt to belittle someone who did nothing but try to serve you with kindness." The man's face shifted, his smirk fading as Mr. Lawson's words reached deeper than expected. He glanced around the cafe and saw the eyes of the other customers, not with sympathy, but with quiet disapproval. He was alone in his defense. Mr. Lawson continued, his voice calm but steady. "This cafe was built not only on good drinks, but on respect. Every person who walks through this door deserves to be treated with kindness, whether they are a customer or a member of my team. When you raised your voice and spilled that coffee, you did more than make a mess. You tried to break the spirit of someone who showed you nothing but patience. That will not be allowed here." Emma felt her eyes sting with emotion. For the first time since the incident began, she felt seen, truly defended. The burden on her chest lightened. The man shifted in his chair, his posture no longer filled with pride. He spoke again, though his voice carried less certainty. "I only wanted it hot. That is all." Mr. Lawson looked at him directly. "Then that is all you should have asked for, respectfully. You would have been served gladly, as every customer here is, but the moment you chose anger over patience, the moment you chose insult over understanding, you lost more than your coffee. You lost the respect of everyone here." The words hung in the air, heavier than silence. Customers nodded, some murmuring softly in agreement. An elderly gentleman near the window tapped his cane lightly on the floor, a quiet gesture of support. A young woman whispered to her friend, "This is what leadership looks like." Emma stood tall now, her shoulders no longer heavy. She realized that Mr. Lawson was not only defending her, he was defending the very values that made the Willow Cup more than just a cafe. The man looked around again, and for the first time, his expression showed doubt. His eyes dropped briefly to the table, then lifted again, though without the fire they once carried. Mr. Lawson's voice softened slightly, though it remained firm. "You have a choice. You can stay here, enjoy your coffee with respect, and be part of the community we have built. Or you can leave if you cannot find it within yourself to treat others kindly. But what happened here will not be repeated." The man hesitated, his pride wrestling with the truth in the owner's words. At last he muttered, "I understand." His tone was quieter now, though not quite apologetic. Mr. Lawson gave a single nod. He turned to Emma and spoke gently so that only she could hear. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. You stood with patience where many would have answered with anger. That is strength." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. She whispered back, "Thank you." The cafe slowly returned to life again. Customers began speaking in gentle tones, the sound of cups and spoons filling the air once more. Yet something had changed. The Willow Cup was no longer just a place for coffee that morning. It had become a reminder of how respect and dignity must stand above anger. Mr. Lawson remained near the counter, keeping watch. His presence alone reassured everyone that the cafe was safe again, a place where kindness mattered most. And though the man stayed at his table, sipping silently now, the power of his earlier outburst was gone. What remained was the steady strength of a community that had chosen compassion over cruelty. The Willow Cup began to recover from the storm. The soft hum of conversations slowly returned, though many customers kept glancing toward the counter, still thinking about what had just unfolded. They had witnessed more than a disagreement over coffee. They had seen a lesson in patience, strength, and respect. Emma moved quietly behind the counter, wiping a cup before setting it gently on the shelf. She felt tired, but she also felt lighter. The presence of Mr. Lawson had changed everything. His words had carried the weight she had been unable to speak. Still, her heart was not fully settled. She wondered whether the man had truly understood, or if he would carry his anger into the world outside. The man sat at his table, staring into his cup. He was quieter now, his shoulders less stiff, his eyes fixed on the dark surface of his drink. He had come in with impatience and pride, but the calm strength of the owner's words seemed to have broken through the shield he had built. Around him, the cafe's warmth returned, but he remained alone, his silence louder than any earlier outburst. Mr. Lawson did not leave things unfinished. He believed that lessons were not only spoken, but lived. After giving Emma a reassuring smile, he walked slowly toward the man's table. Each step carried calm authority, and the entire cafe seemed to follow his movement with their eyes. When he reached the table, he did not stand tall in challenge. Instead, he pulled out the empty chair opposite the man and sat down. The customers leaned forward ever so slightly, waiting. Emma watched with quiet anticipation, her heart steady now. Mr. Lawson placed his hands on the table and spoke in a voice that was gentle but firm. "May I share something with you?" The man hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "If you want." Mr. Lawson nodded. "I have been running this cafe for over 20 years. In that time, I have seen many mornings like this one. People rush in, worried about work, carrying burdens that others cannot see. Some are tired, some are angry, some are simply lonely. But I have also seen how a single choice in how we treat one another can change everything." The man shifted in his seat, his eyes avoiding Mr. Lawson's steady gaze. He muttered, "I was just upset. That is all." Mr. Lawson leaned forward, slightly, his tone still calm. "We all get upset. That is part of being human. But upset is not an excuse to hurt someone else. When you raised your voice, when you spilled that coffee, you were not only expressing frustration, you were taking away another person's dignity. That is something no one has the right to do. The words landed heavily. The man's jaw tightened, but he did not speak. Around the cafe, silence grew once again, though this time it was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes when people are reflecting, learning. Emma, still behind the counter, felt her chest swell with emotion. Mr. Lawson was not simply defending her. He was teaching everyone in the room, herself included, about the deeper meaning of respect. The man finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. "I did not think of it that way. I just wanted my order right." Mr. Lawson nodded. "And you had every right to ask for that." But kindness is not measured when things go well. It is measured in moments when we are frustrated. Anyone can be polite when they are happy. True character shows when we are disappointed or angry. The man's eyes flickered with thought. His hands, once clenched tightly around his cup, slowly relaxed. He looked down at the table, his pride softening. "Maybe I was too harsh," he admitted, his words low but honest. Mr. Lawson offered a small smile. "Harsh words can be forgiven, but only if we learn from them. I am not asking you to be perfect. None of us are. I am asking you to remember that every person deserves respect, no matter how small the situation may seem." The customers nodded quietly, many of them touched by the wisdom in his words. A young student at the corner table whispered to her friend, "That is something I will never forget." Emma felt tears threaten her eyes again, but this time they were not from pain. They were from the comfort of seeing compassion triumph. She knew she would carry this moment with her, not as a memory of humiliation, but as a lesson in the power of calm strength. The man looked up at last. His expression changed. His pride had softened into something more vulnerable, something almost regretful. "I see your point," he said slowly. "I should not have spoken the way I did." It was not a grand apology, but it was a beginning. And in that moment, it was enough. Mr. Lawson nodded once more, satisfied not with victory but with growth. "That is all I ask. Take this as a lesson, not just for here but for every place you go. Anger fades, but words remain. Choose them with care." The man gave a small nod, then sat in silence again, but his silence was different now. It carried thought rather than defiance. Mr. Lawson rose from the table and returned to the counter. His presence seemed taller now, though he had spoken softly. He had not scolded with anger. He had not embarrassed the man with insults. He had delivered a lesson with dignity, and in doing so, he had reminded everyone present of what respect truly meant. The cafe slowly regained its full life. Conversations returned, but now they carried a lighter tone. People smiled at Emma as they placed their orders. A little boy waved at her from his seat, and she waved back, her smile genuine again. Daniel leaned toward her and whispered, "He handled that perfectly, didn't he?" Emma nodded, her voice steady. "Yes, he showed us that kindness can be strong too." Mr. Lawson gave her another reassuring glance. He did not need to say anything more. His actions had spoken louder than any words. The lesson had been delivered not just to the rude customer, but to everyone who had witnessed it. The Willow Cup was no longer just a place to buy coffee. It had become a classroom where dignity, patience, and respect were the subjects of the day. And in that small cafe on Maple Street, people left not only with drinks in their hands, but with a story in their hearts. A story they would remember. A story they would share. A story that proved one simple truth. Kindness may bend under pressure, but it never breaks. The morning had faded into afternoon, and sunlight spilled through the large windows of the Willow Cup. The cafe was alive once again with soft chatter and the gentle clatter of cups and spoons. The earlier storm had passed, leaving behind not damage, but a sense of growth and calm. Emma moved behind the counter, her steps lighter than they had been all day. She arranged pastries with care, each movement reflecting a newfound confidence. The incident from that morning still lingered in her mind, but it no longer weighed on her. She had been supported, defended, and most importantly, reminded that her worth was never tied to someone else's anger. The man who had caused the disturbance earlier sat quietly at his table near the window. His cup had long been empty, yet he remained seemingly lost in thought. He occasionally glanced around, observing the life of the cafe with a softer gaze. He was no longer the same person who had stormed in with impatience and pride. He had been given a lesson not through anger or confrontation, but through calm words and example. Mr. Lawson stood behind the counter, speaking gently to customers as he took their orders. He seemed at ease, yet he carried the quiet weight of a leader who had just guided his team and his patrons through a difficult moment. His presence was a reminder that true leadership was not measured by authority alone, but by the care and respect shown to others. A young woman approached the counter, smiling at Emma. "Thank you for the coffee and your patience this morning," she said softly. "It meant a lot to see how you handled everything." Emma smiled back, her cheeks warm. "It was not just me. Mr. Lawson reminded us all that kindness matters more than anything else." The woman nodded and found a seat by the window, sipping her latte as she watched the world outside. Emma returned to her work, feeling the calm strength of the cafe's environment wash over her. The man at the window cleared his throat, and Emma turned to see him looking at her. There was a hesitation in his voice that had not been there before. "I wanted to say, I am sorry for how I acted. I was rude, and it was not fair to you." Emma felt a wave of relief. She nodded gently. "Thank you. That means a lot." He looked down at his hands, then back at her. "I did not understand before. I thought it was just about coffee, but it is about respect. I see that now." Emma smiled, her eyes reflecting genuine warmth. "It is never too late to learn. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after." Mr. Lawson watched from across the counter, a small smile on his face. He knew the lesson had reached its mark. Not only had the man been reminded of patience and respect, but the entire cafe had witnessed the power of calm and thoughtful leadership. The day continued. More customers came and went, each greeted with the same care and attention as before. The atmosphere in the cafe felt lighter, more alive, and even more welcoming than it had in the morning. Emma moved with grace, her confidence returning fully. She understood now that she could face challenges without fear when supported by someone who valued dignity above all. The man who had caused the earlier disruption finished his drink and stood slowly. He approached the counter, and Emma felt a slight nervousness, though it was tempered by the calm of the day. "I just wanted to say thank you again," he said. "Not just for the coffee, but for showing me patience and respect when I did not deserve it." Emma nodded, her smile warm. "Thank you for understanding. That makes all the difference." Mr. Lawson stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Emma's shoulder. "You see," he said quietly, so only she could hear, "sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves. You handled this with strength, and so did he. That is what matters." Emma felt a sense of pride mixed with relief. The day that had started with tension and anger had ended with understanding and growth. She realized that the Willow Cup was more than just a cafe. It was a place where people could learn about patience, kindness, and respect through real experiences, not just words. The man turned to leave, pausing at the door to glance back at the cafe. His expression was different now, less tense, more thoughtful. He gave a small nod toward Mr. Lawson and Emma, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson he had received. Then he stepped out into the sunlight, carrying more than just the memory of coffee. He carried a lesson in respect that he would not forget. The afternoon continued, peaceful and full of life. Emma refilled cups and greeted customers with warmth. Mr. Lawson moved through the cafe, attending to small details while keeping watch over the entire room. The atmosphere was calm yet vibrant, a reflection of the strength and care that had been shown that morning. As the day drew to a close, the cafe began to empty. Emma wiped down the counters, arranging chairs and preparing for the next day. She felt a quiet satisfaction in her work, a feeling deeper than the pride of completing tasks. She had experienced something valuable. She had learned the power of patience, and she had seen the impact of true leadership. Mr. Lawson approached her once more, his steps soft on the wooden floor. "You did very well today," he said. "Not everyone could have handled what happened this morning with the same grace." Emma looked up at him, her eyes shining. "I could not have done it without your support. Thank you for showing me how to stay calm and stand strong." He nodded, a small smile on his face. "That is what leaders do. We help others find their strength, and sometimes we teach lessons in the quietest ways, through example rather than words alone." Emma smiled, feeling the truth in his words. The Willow Cup was more than a cafe, and she was more than a barista. She had learned that challenges could be overcome with patience, that respect could change hearts, and that kindness could leave a lasting mark. As the last customer left and the door closed with a gentle chime, Emma took a deep breath. The day was over, but its lessons would stay with her forever. She glanced around the cafe, seeing the familiar tables and chairs bathed in the golden afternoon light. Everything felt right again. Mr. Lawson turned to her one last time before stepping into the back room. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow is another day to make a difference." Emma nodded, her heart full. She knew she would never forget this day. It had begun with anger and frustration, but it had ended with understanding, growth, and hope. In that small cafe on Maple Street, life returned to its gentle rhythm. And in the hearts of those who witnessed it, a powerful story remained. A story about patience, kindness, and the quiet strength of standing up for what is right. The Willow Cup was more than a place for coffee. It was a place where lessons were lived and hearts were changed. And for Emma, for Mr. Lawson, and for everyone who walked through its doors, it was a reminder that respect and kindness were the most important ingredients in life, far more than any cup of coffee could ever be.